welcome back. My name is Neil Charran, and this is the Gideon Star Chronicler. Wanted to talk to you today about The Mandalorian. This will be my spoiler review. I loved it. I love the series. I think it's an excellent tool for storytellers. They're not very long, each episode, and you can basically go through them and plot out the different archetypes, different story beats, and use it in your own writing. Quite a bit of it is inspirational. Quite a bit of it's taken inspiration from other places as well. So the first episode introduces us to the Mandalorian. For obvious reasons, he has a thing about droids. Droids basically killed his family, so he's very distrustful of them. We get the idea that he was adopted into the Mandalorians, and he's basically working as a bounty hunter. The episode is solid and ends. Okay, and this is the big spoiler. This is the spoiler at all. If you guys don't already know, it's a meme, but it ends with Baby Yoda. And that was basically the big surprise. So in terms of your character, or in terms of this character, we get a setup where he's on a bounty, and the guy's begging, explaining the situation, and begging him basically to let him go, offering to pay him. And the Mandalorian very coolly, very calmly, very coldly, basically refuses, and actually is so cold that places his bounty in carbonite, just to drive the theme home visually and metaphorically. He's so cold that he puts you on ice. So, or you become ice because he's so cold. That was actually quite wonderfully done. Obviously, though, all of this is a setup, and this is very important. We've all come to know, that basically our characters, all of them that will be introduced, will be in some sort of conflict: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, but they will be in some kind of conflict. And, so the question always is what is the conflict? What's the conflict of this? And so I'm watching this character. This is the protagonist, or this is the main character who we're gonna find has an arc. And so what's his conflict? Obviously, it's going to be something to do with the next bounty. But to be quite honest, completely surprised it was Baby Yoda. I didn't know what it would be. Maybe he was going to be offered another bounty on a Mandalorian. I didn't know if he would take that or how that would work, or, not trying to think too much ahead or think about it, living in the moment with the series, enjoying what the storyteller is giving me. But, every now and again, obviously, our minds, especially now that we're much more elevated to storytelling, will sort of like, oh, yeah, it's going to be, the bounty, and the bounty's going to be what? Oh, and then you sort of let that go and just enjoy, what you're watching. The second episode felt like filler to me, while I was watching it. It's not, actually. It comes back, and this is actually thematically something that you also need to consider in storytelling, which is that anything that you introduce, especially something that has some significance, whether it's confined in one story, still needs some sort of payoff. That payoff can come in the next story, or the next, or the next, or the next. This had 8 stories to pay off this payoff was actually in the 8th story from the second one. But while that other payoff was happening, and to be specific in terms of spoilers, this is about the Mudhorn. While that spoiler is happening with the Mudhorn, for later, while that's happening with the Mudhorn, we get entertainment. Mandalorians vaporizing Jawas, vaporizing other bounty hunters that are after Baby Yoda. And then we see Baby Yoda use the Force, which is, awesome. But I felt like the second episode was just kind of like the story of the week kind of thing. And I didn't know where it was going, where it was taking me. And that's where the third episode comes in. And that is 1, 2, and 3 together are a beginning, middle, and end. 1, 2, and 3 together are beginning, middle, and end. It is phenomenal. I almost wish Disney had given us the first 3 episodes, because the next 4, 5, 6 are stories of the week, or just adventures of the week kind of things. And they're wonderful, but they really are 4, 5, and 6. They're not another 1, 2, 3 story arc. In fact, they're feeding into what will be 7 and 8, but they're just on their own. They're just on their own story. So 3 is where everything comes to a head. The bounty hunter delivers Baby Yoda, as he does. He gets payment for it. So that's big. So you get paid, fulfilling the contract. He then has a guilty conscience about it, wants to know what's going to happen. He was a foundling, basically, again, a child, a youngling or child that was found and then taken in by a family. So he's now knows this is, or foundling can also be interpreted again as an orphan. He sees this Baby Yoda as an orphan and obviously remembers himself, wants to know what's going to happen, investigates a little bit and finds out they're doing some bad stuff to Baby Yoda, and basically rescues him. And again, wasn't 100% sure where it was going to go. I was actually my wife, funny enough, was like, he's going to rescue, right? I was like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the story's going. I'm enjoying it as it is, but I maybe eventually or something else, or maybe there's some other lesson that he'll learn, or Baby Yoda is supposed to lead us to something else. But no, Baby Yoda is the thing. And wise on Favreau and everyone else who was Jon Favreau and Filoni and everyone else that was involved in the storytelling of this. Good on you, Disney, for having faith in these guys to do this stuff, because they really did a wonderful thing. And it was a wonderful lead into Rise of Skywalker. It made me come into Rise of Skywalker much more positive towards Star Wars than its predecessor. But the idea is that we've got this now full story. And so now you can take these characters on this story of the week adventure. So I actually enjoyed the 4th episode. There's a lot of criticism about it. I believe it's the one that was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, but I really actually enjoyed it. I thought the ATST was incredibly scary. I have watched Return of the Jedi a lot of times, and maybe it's the Ewoks. Maybe it's how they take them down with logs and stuff like that, but I never thought ATSTs were that threatening. That thing is actually quite menacing and threatening, and making it a centerpiece was an absolute phenomenal. This is one of the episodes that I told you where they borrowed from the 7 Samurai or the Magnificent 7. Instead of 7, there are 2. They introduced us to a new character, Cara Dune, and she works with the Mandalorian to help a village fight back this evil monster and these raiders that are coming for their harvest. Again, 5 and 6 are fillers. There's actually, I can't believe this, but there's actually an episode with Bill Burr as a mercenary, as a bad guy. It took. So I'm going to walk you through a process. It was like, is that Bill Burr? Is Bill Burr playing a bad guy? Is Bill Burr playing a leader? Is Bill Burr talking smack to the Mandalorian? Is Bill Burr in Star Wars? Bill Burr hates Star Wars. How is Bill Burr Star Wars? And so that took about 1.5 seconds, let's say, for my brain to process what I was watching. And then I was totally into it. They had this actress that I've seen before in Harry Potter and in Game of Thrones play a Twi'lek who has a past with the Mandalorian. And these are all wonderful things. So even though these are technically story of the week, they're not, I won't call them filler episodes because they do have character development, character arcs, and they're introducing characters that come to play again in the final episodes. So we find out, for instance, in episode 7 about the the Ugnaught named Queel, who we were introduced in 2. And he basically took the IG-11 and remade it, which is an allegory to raising a child. It was actually wonderfully done. And then we get into 8, where we're introduced to the actual main bad guy, Moff Gideon. And, you know, the story ends with the Mandalorian getting... So again, here's another one. In episode 3, the Mandalorian saved by other Mandalorians after getting into a fight because the Imperials are the enemy of the Mandalorians. At one point it was the Jedi, which is introduced also in episode 8, but now it's the Imperials. And his Mandalorian brethren are very upset with him that he's taking bounties and that he took a bounty. Not that he's taking bounties, actually. They weren't upset about the other bounties because the money does go to their covert. They call it a covert. And their covert gets, you know, the benefits of this, but this particular bounty really upset them that they were for Imperials. And so at the end of episode 3, they come in on jetpacks. He doesn't have one, they do. And there's a line where he says, "I got to get me one of those," or something to that effect. And then that's paid off in episode 8. So something from episode 3 is paid off in episode 8. And these are all the wonderful things that we look forward to our storytellers to give us. So, you know, it's not just a, "Hey, remember that thing? Remember that thing? Hey, remember that?" That's, you know, no, it's an actual arc, an actual character development, an actual story point. And you want to give it to your audience, but do it as they're doing it. Take your time. Let it be just a throwaway thing. Let it just be a funny little line as it stands on its own. And then later on, you know, I mean, when he said the line, because there was such an emphasis on it, I knew that they were going to give him a jetpack eventually, but I thought maybe season 2 or something like that, or season 3. Maybe that would be the way they end the series or something, that he's a full Mandalorian and he gets a jetpack. I'm not 100%. Or maybe Baby Yoda gets a jetpack. I don't know. I don't know, but I loved where they took us. I loved the story that they gave us. I love every point, and this is also important for writing, that for the most part, everything is important. If it's not directly important to the story, you want to seriously considering cutting it, editing it, minimizing it. I mean, if it's funny, if there's a purpose in terms of an emotional turn, obviously, you know, everything doesn't have to serve the larger thematic goal. Everything doesn't have to serve where the story is going. That you can have, in fact, it's important to have these quieter moments where character development can happen, where we can start to care about the character, where we can start to really feel something for the character. We're going on the journey with them. I mean, Baby Yoda is a meme, but we have a positive affection. Now, visually, Baby Yoda is top notch. It's a puppet, but and I'll talk about this in a later video in regards to Yoda himself. But they did it so well. It is almost like basically a little toddler kid. So cute. Makes the cooing noises and you know, seemingly is defenseless or virtually defenseless. You know, throws out a force power, but then basically passes out from the strain and has to rest. Even though it's not completely defenseless, Baby Yoda still has to be protected, and we feel that. We're along with that. Again, spoilers. In episode 8, there's these stormtroopers or scout troopers on speeder bikes that kill Queel, and which was actually a very, very sad moment. It was very impactful. I was actually shocked. I wasn't 100% sure he was dead, but they focused on him enough that I'm like, yeah, he's dead. Wow. And it was very powerful. And then they scoop up Baby Yoda, and then they do this sort of, this was directed by Taika Waititi, so there's a lot of good humor in it. There's this moment where they pause and they're waiting for the okay from Moff Gideon, and there's a bunch of hilarity. That's also character development for Moff Gideon, because he seems to be virtually ruthless. He killed his own men, and they're like did he really kill his own men? Did he kill his own men? It's like, yeah, he killed his own men. I get that point. Do you get that point? I get that point. And then it's like, hey, I'm still waiting to hear something. It's like, yeah, a guy just interrupted him and he killed him. So this is going to take a little bit. And so they have Baby Yoda. He doesn't know it. And this is also a neat thing because this is introducing also a weakness of Moff Gideon. His men have Baby Yoda. He doesn't need to do any of the things that he's doing, but he doesn't know it because he's so ruthless in this moment. And he's being so ruthless in this moment. And he's a ruthless person virtually that this will probably be his undoing. It is his undoing because he doesn't get what he's after. But these scout troopers hit Baby Yoda. They punch him, smack him about. They keep it Disney-esque. So Baby Yoda is in a bag, so you don't kind of see the kid actually. He's in a bag, so that's also horrid. But you don't actually see them physically hitting him, but they're hitting the bag. And there's one scout trooper that particularly like punches the bag when Baby Yoda like bites him or something. So you sit there, you're like, yeah, these guys are dead. They're dead, and we look forward to someone taking them out as soon as possible. And so when it turns out to be IG-11, you can't help but cheer. IG-11 was an assassin droid that's now converted to a nurse droid. And that was actually a wonderful moment too. He's like, I'm no longer an assassin droid, I'm a nurse droid. But he still got the assassin edge. There's a Cargo Greef, which is played by the wonderful Carl Weathers. He's like, if you go near this baby, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to kill you. And he goes, yep, I understand. But he trusts Cara Dune and he trusts the Mandalorian. So the IG-11 has this own autonomy, but also still has that assassin edge. It's quite wonderful. The whole thing was quite wonderful. The Mandalorian also has this thing for his covert, in particular, that he can't take his mask off. It could be just particularly his covert because we do know from the Clone Wars, Mandalorians run around with their helmets off all the time. So the fact that this covert maybe chooses not to, maybe it's a little bit more orthodox, maybe decides that it wants to retain the old ways more. So no living thing has ever seen him with his mask since he put it on. And the IG-11 says, good thing I'm not a living thing. And he takes the mask off. But there is a moment where you're still not 100% sure, about 90% sure, but not 100%, which is, it's still wonderful to have that the Mandalorian might shoot him. You don't know. But he takes the mask off, heals him. They introduce Bacta, which is that wonderful cure-all that was introduced in Empire Strikes Back. And we get to have the story carry along with these characters. And it's wondrous. IG-11 sacrifices himself, which also fulfills the story arc for the Mandalorian. At least he's come to trust one droid. We'll see if he comes to trust others. And maybe that might also come back to bite him so that, that he knows that he has to pick and choose his droids to trust. But, in episode 8 in particular, it's a longer episode. It was established that he is now the father of Baby Yoda until he can, find Baby Yoda's people, whether it's the actual species of Baby Yoda or Jedi, which the Mandalorian declares as warrior sorcerers, which, that's what the Jedi are. They are warrior sorcerers. It's amazing that George Lucas could take basically an advanced Dungeons and Dragons or Dungeons and Dragons trope or old Lord of the Rings trope and turn it into a different iconic. They're Merlins. They're all Merlins. They're all Merlins. Or actually, more specifically, they're Gandalfs because they wield swords. So they conjure magic and they wield swords. They're Gandalfs. They're all Gandalfs, and he's just like, wouldn't it be cool if everybody was a Gandalf? And it's like, yeah, that would be cool. So that's pretty amazing. So I really encourage you to check it out. It's on Disney Plus. If you get the opportunity, it's definitely worth a binge during this holiday season. Happy New Year to you. I hope you guys are doing great, and I will see you in the next one. Remember, keep writing, and we'll get through this together. Happy New Year.